to the Berlin Process Think Tank and Civil Society Forum, which we broadcast to you live, as it were, from Sofia. We were hoping to do this event with all of you here, but in these very strange times, unfortunately, this is impossible. We are still, I think, a very strong team, because we are at least 3 teams put in one. We have the European Council on Foreign Relations and its Bulgarian office, the European Fund for the Balkans and its Belgrade headquarters, and the Institute for Democracy in Skopje, our partners in this, with whom we did the first leg or the first part of this meeting. When was it? Mid-March, right before everything closed down. And back then in Skopje, we thought it is really a great opportunity for us, the think tanks in the region, to first of all bridge the distinction between member states and non-member states in the Balkans, because we are obviously a one very integrated region, but also to get the think tanks and the civil society from the Western Balkans talk from the region to the leaders of the Berlin process. I am very happy that this is still happening, despite of the fact that the ministerial and also the summit are happening online. We still succeeded to keep to stick to our plans and to make this meeting possible. We have invited a lot of our colleagues over Zoom, and we are screening this session also online on YouTube. So welcome to everybody who is watching us as well. This initial panel is supposed to give us kind of the framework of the discussion, and I will leave this to my friends Aleksandra and Marko to do that. I just want to say that the main benefit for me from this event is the opportunity to be able to really prove that there are a lot of very interesting, very smart people in the region who have great ideas. And we can use really this opportunity to push them and to demonstrate them in front of the policymakers. This is why I'm also very happy that Minister Zaharieva and Minister Osmani, the foreign ministers of Bulgaria and North Macedonia, are here with us, and they will have the floor in a moment. Without further ado, Aleksandra, over to you.
Thank you very much, Vessela. Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to the 2020 edition. Like all the 2020 editions, obviously it's online and Zoom. I would like to thank you on behalf of the European Fund for the Balkans, especially responsible for today's part of the Civil Society Forum, which started back in 2015 with its Vienna edition, and then it became an integral part of the Berlin process. Last year, under the Polish presidency, a new format has been introduced, the Think Tank Forum, which shows that in our region we have developed a number of high-quality think tanks that they deserve their own forum and platform. And today I'm really happy that we managed to integrate both of them. We will have one rather geopolitical view, and then we will have another view which will show how it looks like when geopolitics becomes personal. And in our region, it's becoming very personal. The capitals of our regions are figuring very prominently on the global top 10 lists when it comes to pollution. And this is only one thing. We will hear more about that in the second panel. When Bulgaria and North Macedonia took over 1.5 years ago the presidency of the Berlin process, everybody was so full of hope, and it was such a different moment in history than what we see now. In the last 1.5 years, we had a lot of strokes. We survived them all. But I think that maybe also today is a day when we can ask ourselves, will enlargement and will our region survive the next stroke, or will we face the situation enlargement is dead, long live enlargement? We will discuss the outside actor today, and maybe that is only one part of the picture that shows an alternative that we could all live if we really bury enlargement. But I will not be too pessimistic. I will stop here. Thank you very much again. Welcome, and Marko, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Aleksandra. Dear ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, I would like to congratulate our partner ECFR, Vessela, and her team, as well as Aleksandra and EFB for making this event possible in all COVID-19 challenges that we face. Distinguished ministers, think tankers, civil society representatives, dear participants, we opened this think tank forum and the civil society forum with one eye on the prospects for renewed partnership over the Atlantic, and with other eye on the EU strategic autonomy in the INO. Ambitious global commissions and Commission and the Green Deal are challenged by the recovery plans for EU economy restoration set for 2022, while China is galloping away from the grip of COVID-19 towards global economic dominance in 2035. Dear guests, climate and pollution is changing for worse. This weekend, Macedonian government decided to shut down all hydropower plants due to critical minimum of water levels in all accumulations. We are not doing any good in changing our economy on green basis. The Western Balkan accounts for 45 million tons of CO2 emissions annually, and all 16 coal plants in the Western Balkan pollute as much as the entire EU fleet of 250 units. If I was coming also from Skopje to this event by car, it would take me 4 hours to reach Sofia, since there is no highway, no railway connection until now. The journey would take me through many ghost towns and villages, while UN projects depopulation of 25 to 50% in Central and Southeastern Europe by the end of this century. The future of EU and Western Balkans are intertwined by these challenges: environment, economic convergence, migration, security, hybrid threats, rule of law, and geopolitical investment, something we will discuss soon. But they all must be tackled together and in a common approach. Yes, it is evident we have to speed up the common regional market and the infrastructural connections and build greener economies, but not to do this, the imperative is not to do this with corrosive geopolitical capital. This capital weakens resilience and enhances malign political influences. I would like to use this opportunity to appeal to Western Balkan officials to stop the race to the bottom and unconditionally commit to competitive, to have regional public prosecutor office with investigative offices that will tackle regional organized crime. At the last think tank forum in Skopje in March, we gathered 18 countries and 80 think tankers to signal the importance of political dialogue and cooperation within the region and the region within EU under a uniting narrative and shared future. Soon you will be able to see the link of the edited volume of all publications we produced based on the panels and the discussions on this forum in the chat box of the Zoom platform. For the first time, the Berlin process is hosted by two countries, one an EU member and the other a candidate state. We were granted ownership on the very process that aims to assist us towards full integration with EU. Will we prove worthy to the task and what we achieved? The question is it another brick in the breach or another brick in the wall? I would stop here with these questions and would like to thank all of you for coming here, virtually, of course.
Thank you very much, Marko, with this Pink Floyd style ending. I think we can turn to the ministers, and maybe I just give the mic straight back to you. You want to quiz them a little bit before we enter our work.
Okay, yes, thank you, Vessela. Again, thanks for the Minister Zaharieva and Minister Osmani for accepting the invitation to open the discussion, to set the scene to this think tank forum and the civil society forum. We have around 20 minutes to discuss the goals of the Berlin Process Summit in Sofia, and without any further ado, I would moderate this occasion by asking around maybe 3 questions. Please account for around 3 to 4 minutes per question for your answers. And I would start with Minister Zaharieva. You just co-chaired the ministerial meeting this morning in light of the summit tomorrow. And we are finalizing the first Balkan co-presidency with the Berlin process. So what is our legacy, Minister Zaharieva? What will make Berlin process and this co-presidency to be remembered for?
Hello to everybody. Allow me to start with gratitude. First to Vessela, of course, who was agreed to be Sofia coordinator for the think tank and civil society forum, and of course Marko and Aleksandra that who joined her. And unfortunately, as Vessela said, it was planned to be physical. It was planned Bujar to be together with me today, and we to co-chair from Sofia, but unfortunately I'm in my home and he is in Skopje. But this is the year of COVID, and we should learn to live with it. It was a very concrete question, and thank you for this. I think that the 2 major achievements, despite the fact that it was we should really change the whole program that was planned in March. Actually, the last there was one physical meeting. It's maybe Aleksandra said that everything was virtual, but it was one, and it was foreign ministers meeting in Skopje on 10th of March this year. I was together with Bujar's predecessor Nicola and with some of the European and some of the other ministers. And today's ministerial meeting was built on what we start in Skopje on 10th of March. And the focus today actually, and I'm happy that the focus today was youth and the role of civil society in the Berlin process. And we adopt very concrete conclusions of the co-chairs, me and Bujar, that will be incorporated in the leaders' conclusions tomorrow. But I think that the most important and visible achievement of our co-chairmanship will be first signing tomorrow of the declaration of the regional market in the Western Balkans, which should prepare the countries for the European single market. And it's extremely important, especially now in COVID era pandemic. And second is declaration on the green agenda for the Western Balkans that will reconfirm the commitments of the countries to align themselves with the ambitious action plan envisaged under the European Green Deal. I think those are the most visible things. Unfortunately, the plan was to have a physical youth forum in July in Skopje. It was not possible because of the pandemic, but we included the youth organization in the meeting of the Ministers of Economy, focused on decent job creation and stop of brain drain. So we wasn't able to meet us physically, but I think the achievements of the first ever double co-chairmanship and first ever chairmanship of the countries from the region. As you said, Marko, one European member states, the other candidate. I think we managed to achieve a very good result for our presidency. Co-chairmanship, not presidency.
Thank you, Minister Zaharieva. Minister Osmani, what's your take on this question? What would you emphasize? What you will tell your kids in the future? What did we achieve?
Well, first of all, thank you, Marko, for inviting me to participate in this panel. I believe that the role of Berlin process throughout these 6 years of its existence was to foster regional cooperation and to accelerate EU integration. But I think that the current model of joint chairmanship between a candidate country from the region and a neighboring EU member state signifies regional ownership and stewardship of our regional affairs and interests. And I think this bears the symbolic, but also I think it will be remembered as a regional brand of success for its result-oriented approach, but as well working and succeeding in a very dire circumstances, very difficult circumstances and challenges. The presidency has set an ambitious agenda that was unfortunately heavily affected by the pandemics, but we managed to regroup, to adapt to the circumstances and to produce a significant list of achievements that, if are going to be endorsed tomorrow by the leaders, I think will mark this summit as a real success. And one of the outstanding achievement of this process would be the revised action plan on common region, which will enable creating a regional market of 18 million people based on EU rules and procedures with an aim to bringing it closer to the EU single market, but as well to increase its competitiveness and attractiveness to foreign investors. And also an important moment in this action plan is the incorporation of the 4 freedoms that were part of the so-called mini Schengen initiative, which sort of creates a bridge and complementarity between the regional initiatives, by that increasing their efficiency. We should also not underestimate the role of the agreement on free movement with ID cards between the countries in the Western Balkans, that in addition to other initiatives in the first MAP REA as recognition of the degrees would have an additional impetus on free movement of people, on the youth in the region. The enhanced, I would also mention the enhanced Roma declaration. That's an initiative that we have proposed, or we proposed last year in Poznan, and it was further reaffirmed in the Tirana conference this year, but as well the green agenda and its importance now. So overall, I think it hopefully tomorrow is going to be a successful summit that will pave the way for future regional ownership of this process, as well, with marked results, concrete results in people's life.
Thank you very much, Minister Osmani. Now we envisaged this next 2 panels to be focused on geopolitical investments, on the threats that foreign capital poses to the cooperation of the region, but it also emanates has implications on the EU as well, definitely. So, Mr. Zaharieva, how do you see 2021 in terms of enlargement process as a resilience mechanism for protection of the geopolitical interests of the EU. To put it more concretely, how can a region prepare and fight better against geopolitical investments and malign influences?
Like build resilience in their societies. This is the shortest answer that I can give. I think, and that's why the Berlin process is so important initiative. It's planned for 5 years to prepare the countries for eventual membership of European Union. One of the most important preparation is to build resilience in the societies, in the economies, in institutions, in the media, in the non-government organizations. Last 2-3 days, very intensively, we discussed what and if and how will change in the United States policy towards Western Balkans after the elections. What does it mean for the region? My opinion is that maybe there will be even more focus, but the Balkans are in Europe. And their family, it's European family. Of course, we work together with our friends from cross over the ocean to support the resilience building initiatives among the Western Balkan countries. But the true driving aging of the reforms in that country is the European perspective of the Western Balkans. I think that the fact that we are still not able to approve negotiating framework with North Macedonia doesn't mean that the process will stop. Bulgaria is, and will be among the hardest supporter of the European perspective of the Western Balkans in the European Union. But those countries should also take their responsibilities. And Bulgaria agreed in March, actually decision was taken in March. Now is the next step, it's a negotiating framework. We agreed in March for both countries to start negotiation talks. In the decision, there is concrete text for implementation of the Good Neighbor Relationship Treaty with Bulgaria. And I want to thank Bujar and his predecessor Nicola and all of our teams in the ministry that they worked so close during whole period of the co-chairmanship. And it was excellent cooperation on daily base coordination. And I'm sure this also helped our teams to increase understanding for each other. And despite the disputes that we have, I'm happy that they didn't hinder the initiative. And I'm sure that tomorrow there will be a very successful end of our joint co-chairmanship. So I'm not agree that enlargement is dead. And I hope, as you, Marko, said, this to be another brick in the bridge, not in the law.
Okay, I hope you have a historical achievement tomorrow on the summit. Your words bring me to my last question for Minister Osmani. The Berlin process was envisaged to facilitate bilateral disputes and cooperation. So as it stands up to now, it has been successful in opening debates, but closure of issues is still pending in most of the cases. Putting aside the case of North Macedonia, and considering big steps forward with the bilateral agreements that were concluded with Bulgaria and Greece. So did we use the mechanisms of the process sufficiently to resolve open issues? Or with transferring them further on, we have burdened the new enlargement methodology that is intended to focus purely on merit and deep-oriented EU reforms?
Well, I agree that one component of the Berlin process is through wider regional cooperation, through strengthened communication between politics and businesses and people to people, to facilitate or aims to facilitate overcoming the bilateral issues, everything in context, in light of European integration. I think that North Macedonia has moved a lot forward in the last 3 years in closing the outstanding issue with its neighbors. And I think, and I usually repeat, that North Macedonia has revived the European idea in the Balkans. If Europe was founded on 2 principles, and that was respecting diversity and reconciliation and good neighborly relations, with the 3 agreements that we have signed or implemented in this period, we have revived that idea through the Ohrid Framework Agreement by accepting the diversity in the country, and through the treaty with Bulgaria and Prespa Agreement that engaged us in a process of reconciliation and good neighborliness. Of course, in the Balkans, these processes are work in progress. There are still bumps on the road to a genuine good neighborliness. And unfortunately, that is at the account of the accession prospect of some of the countries aspiring to join the EU. And I agree with you that this represents a burden to the new EU enlargement methodology, sidelining merit and reform-oriented process. Such processes provide fuel for those questioning the legitimacy and credibility of the EU enlargement process. But the only way forward to resolving open issues, fostering understanding and durable good neighborliness lies with a genuine political will, open dialogue, and awareness for the necessity of a common European future. The Berlin process and the joint presidency demonstrated that if there is a political will, there is also a way for a functioning, positive, result-oriented environment. And we should capitalize on this experience and continue offering policy solutions that will improve or rectify past misunderstanding, remove obstacles for normal communication, and strengthen bilateral links, and sets the ground for prosperous European future.
Okay. Thank you, Minister Osmani. Minister Zaharieva, it was a pleasure to hear you and to set the scene for our next panelists. I hope that our Balkan co-presidency will be very much successful tomorrow, because this and next generations will depend on the outcome, definitely on the summit that is about to happen. So I will hand over the floor to for the next panel. We will discuss Chinese regional approach in the Western Balkans and the EU response. The panel that will be moderated by Vessela Tcherneva. Once again, thank you, dear ministers, and good luck tomorrow.
Thank you, and thank you, Marko. We know that in diplomacy, misunderstandings is a euphemism for big problems sometimes, hopefully for smaller problems in our case. We're going to talk, however, about a big issue, an issue that has a very long perspective. We know China's approach towards anything, I guess, is a longue durée approach It is not constrained by General Affairs Councils or COREPER meetings. It is a strategy rather which spans over years and decades. And we have the feeling that actually the strategy by China that we see in the Balkans today is one which is changing. We think that there is a shift that we can observe if we look more carefully, that it's not only about infrastructure and investment anymore, that there is more to the Chinese imprint in the region. And given that China will continue being a topic not only here regionally, but also for Europe and also for the transatlantic relations as we go forward, no matter the change of the president in the White House, we thought it would be very important and hopefully also interesting to continue to continue tracing China's impact here. We want also to look at how the countries in the region respond to Chinese efforts and to Chinese policies, and what the EU can do or is not doing enough of. And I have a very capable panel. And because we have been having a lot of Bulgarian, Macedonian voices just now, I will start with Gjergji Vurmo from Albania, and I will give him the floor first. If you allow me, Gjergji, can I just ask you to do maybe a couple of minutes on how you would characterize the Chinese approach in the region as such?
Hello, thank you for the invitation, and congratulations to both ECFR and our colleagues from Skopje on putting together these events under this summit. I suppose you started with me, Vessela, because probably Albania is the smallest problem when it comes to Chinese influence or presence. This is the general perception in Albania, but I assume also in the Western Balkan countries. In fact, there are only two major investments of China in Albania. One is in the oiling industry, and the other one is the Tirana International Airport, which the Chinese bought it from Western Consortium. However, for many of us in Albania, it's been really weird first to notice that there is a radio, a Chinese radio airing in Albania. Recently, I was surprised also to see some of the biggest real estate companies having one of the versions of their website also in Chinese. So it's in Albanian, in English, and in Chinese. The perception, rightfully, as you pointed out, has always been that China is out to do business. I don't think that China is out in just doing business in the world anymore, and certainly not. It's not doing business only in the Balkans as well. I mean, the Balkans maybe is not so important, or maybe the Balkans' importance is not solely related to providing access for China to EU market. I strongly believe that China is out to influence. And it certainly has its own priorities and strategic objectives in doing so. Of course, it's a huge economic power. It's a market that many world economies would like to access and to build friendly relations with, including the European Union. But China's plans go, in my opinion, far beyond that. China has important strategic priorities on its own that wants to promote and to find ways to build support around the world. And why not sell also its own model of the economy, of the political system, and so on and so forth. Lastly, when it comes to the Western Balkans, if you look at the EU progress reports over the past 2 years, you will notice different, let's say, conclusions for each of the countries as regards the presence of China or Russia or recently even the Gulf countries. Sometimes I get the impression that China has been a bit silent, or has had a sort of low profile in this kind of debate. So we've been discussing Russian influence or the influence coming from the Gulf countries, and we've been sitting on China's lap when it comes to the priorities that China wants to promote. So the last point is that China's attempt to influence or to insert its presence in countries in the region is not individual. Does not target one single country. Its impact actually targets the region. So if we speak that, if we see today in Serbia or in Montenegro, very large presence of Chinese economic presence or Chinese influence, I think that's a reason that Albania, Macedonia, Kosovo, Bosnia and other countries should also start to be concerned. I think I'll stop here.
Thanks a lot, and I'll come back to you. Maybe I can, however, ask Zoran whether he agrees with what you just said. That China has no individual approach towards the region, that it's much more the region as a whole, and that we are a bit in the business of buying Chinese model. Zoran.
Yeah, thank you, Vessela. I will comply with what Gjergji said. Beijing foreign policy approach to this part of Europe is mostly regional, then country-specific. If you analyze the ways in which Chinese project their influence in the Western Balkans, one might find a clear pattern. For the time being, is purely economical. However, in time, has a perspective to become very political. There are even signs of it now. If we take the example of North Macedonia and Serbia, we have already experienced such a behavior and pressure by Beijing by not aligning with the EU declaration concerning the deployment of missiles on the island in the South China Sea. The corrosive capital that is coming from China, channeled through non-competitive loan conditions set by a state-owned Chinese banks and implemented in mostly or almost fully by Chinese companies, threaten the democratically established institutions and market economy by exploiting our own Western Balkans governance gaps. This also raises serious concern about our own, let's say, Western Balkan authorities' resilience to corruption and our own willingness, or not our own, but the willingness of the political elites to ignore the rule of law and executive projects of this kind in a very non-inclusive manner. Therefore, the China's way of working, according to me, is completely opposite from the political but also economic model and liberal values that these countries from the Western Balkans strive towards on their path towards EU and NATO, well, at least a big part of Western Balkans.
Okay, but if you ask probably some of the prime ministers in the Balkans, they would say, fine, but if we lack enough, foreign capital, if Europeans don't invest enough, then why should we shy away from the Chinese capital?
Yeah, but we're not talking about blocking any investments. We are talking about channeling this investment in a clear and transparent manner by not avoiding our public procurement legislation, which it differs from country to country. The level of alignment is different, but at least to comply with the public procurement legislation that is existing in this country. This is the only thing that is that could block any potential investment by Chinese. We're not saying that we don't want Chinese money. We're just saying that they have to be channeled through competitive and fully transparent procedure.
And when you say that the economic impact is transforming into a political one, what do you mean exactly? Maybe if you can unpack that a bit.
Well, I already mentioned, I will just reiterate, we're actually now, at this point in time, it is mostly economical. So these countries in the Western Balkans are open for investments, or better say loans, that are coming from China, right? At this moment in time, we haven't experienced clear pressure or influence by China on the way our political elites have performed. However, in time, when there is a subject of interest towards China, most probably, as we have seen with the South China Sea declaration, the pressure will come and the countries will not align with the EU position, which can create potentially a problem once these countries become members of the European Union.
Thanks. I'll now turn to Vladimir Shopov, our ECFR fellow, who just returned from a trip across the Balkans. What is your take on looking at the region on both issues, I think, which were mentioned very clearly by Gjergji and Zoran, the regional approach, but also the economic versus political approach that we see?
Well, let me start with the second question, because I think it's the more pertinent one at the present time. And before I respond, maybe I should say that we have been in the middle of a very extensive research project that we have been doing for almost a year now, and in the context of which we have talked to almost 100 people across the region. And I think that the picture that is emerging is quite different from the currently prevailing perceptions and understandings of China's presence in the region in a number of ways. One is that we are clearly seeing a move beyond economics. Yes, it's not so pronounced. Yes, it's pretty nascent. It's not very visible to many people, even to us, before we began our research. But there are already signs, very clear signs, for instance, in sustained increases of Chinese engagement in the field of academia, in the media, even in some civil society activities. So that is clearly beginning to happen. It's going beyond politics. I mean, I can maybe later in the conversation I can say a couple of things about the political dimensions of this, because there is a clear pattern there as well. In the sense that up until a couple of years ago, maybe governments in the region would have been expected on the part of the Chinese to take certain positions on the one China policy on Taiwan, but the list of issues is constantly expanding. We are now having governments being very aggressively spoken to by the Chinese on issues relating to Xinjiang, to Taiwan, to the protests in Hong Kong. Again, they choose how to make this public in different countries in different ways. Sometimes it's not so pronounced, sometimes it's more private. So even at this level, we're already seeing a very clear trend. But the other interesting points about Chinese presence is that it's not just becoming multifaceted, but it's also becoming interconnected. So what we are seeing now is that there are emerging and very clear linkages between different areas and areas of cooperation. And the best way to illustrate this is to talk about nexuses. And let me give you a couple of examples. So, for instance, there is a very clear nexus of rising cooperation between academia and civil society. There is an uptick in cooperation at the university, among universities, mostly private universities. That is now spilling over into civil society activities. You're beginning to see these interconnections at the personality level, at the topic level. So that's already emerging. Another nexus, which is again already, at least to my mind, increasingly apparent, is this linkage between business and media. In other words, you have an uptick in content about China in media outlets which are, in some countries, very close to the government, work with the government on Chinese projects. So again, this is one illustration. And my last point, to answer your first question, is that we are seeing also a multi-level strategy. And to me, this is one of the very interesting findings of our research, because the last couple of years, we have been focusing a bit too much on the big sort of headline items of Chinese engagement, which is, of course, it makes sense.
Investment.
Yeah, big investments, highways, energy, infrastructure. But it's very clear that the Chinese are now much more active at a pretty granular level. And by that, I mean, engaging with individuals, with institutions, non-state institutions. To give you a couple of examples, completely renovate the state film archive in one country, offer, full re-equipment of a major media outlet in another country. And interestingly, a lot of these activities are not necessarily visible. They're not necessarily publicly analyzed. But to be very clear, this is still a nascent situation. I mean, although in a way China is coming to the end of its kind of initial stage of entry of the region, this is still not, if we sort of discussed it in a comparative manner, this is still not of the magnitude, intensity, depth of presence that we have in relation to other more traditional third actors. But we should not underestimate the point that all of these things have actually been achieved within less than a decade. And I think this is a major consideration that we have to bear in mind. And very briefly on your point about the regional approach, yes, China does have a regional approach, but again, what we are finding is that there is incredible variance within their the range of tools and instruments and how they are applied in different countries. So although we might have a regional framework, this does not necessarily mean that you have a uniform and even application of the different tools that the Chinese have at their disposal. They're in fact very flexible. They're learning very quickly. They're trying some things in some countries, other things in other countries. They're utilizing situational opportunities as they arise in one country or another country. So the regional approach and the regional framework is a very useful starting point of how we think about what China is doing. But I think it can be slightly misleading if we ignore the kind of variance and cross-application that we are beginning to see from one country into the next.
Thank you. I'm afraid we will not be able to delve into the individual countries too much, but I was wondering, listening to both ministers, right, they said that they thought the Western Balkans common market and the green agenda are the two major things for the Berlin process. How do you think this is gonna, I don't know, interplay with China's plans for the region? How does that does that help or impede those plans? I don't know who would like to take this one. Maybe Gjergji?
Yeah, sure. Well, I might be wrong, but my sense is that Balkans is too small. So if China succeeds or fails with its attainment of its strategic objectives, the Balkans would be a collateral damage on the way. Because I don't think our efforts here for intra-regional cooperation and expanding the pace of internal integration is what would stop China. I think that countering China's influence starts in the EU. Starts in the EU in the sense that we might analyze as much as we want the interplay of our countries and China, but actually, in the meantime, China has already reached EU member states. Zoran mentioned that one of the opportunities that China would take is by jeopardizing the common positions of the EU foreign policy. It has already done that, right? And you cannot do that by penetrating the Western Balkans. You need to do that by penetrating member states. And China has already done that in Hungary, considering then the level of FDIs in some other countries, in Finland, in Malta, in Luxembourg. But the thing is, the point is for us in the Western Balkans, and I fully agree with my colleague here, the point with my colleague Zoran, the point is we need to focus on our standards. So the main resilience mechanism that the Western Balkans has to invest in order to successfully face those pressures coming from China or any other Eastern or malign influence, is to focus on the rule of law standards, to focus on the standards of democracy. Therefore, when we speak about Chinese or Russian or influence from other countries, we need to speak about the quality of democracy. We need to speak about the quality of rule of law, not only on paper but also in practice. How do these investments or money that comes with the strings attached affect our daily lives and affect, above all our relations with rule of law.
So what you're saying is that if the EU cannot, as of yet, agree, let's say, on a common 5G strategy, it's too much to ask of the Western Balkans, and in the meantime, we can have, I don't know how many surveillance cameras and data breaches in the region.
in a way, yes. What I'm saying is that you cannot ask from a small region like Western Balkans to counter that or to act as the first barrier to China's or any other influence if you have already failed at home. For instance, one of the debates that struck me recently is that whether the EU would organize an EU-China summit where all heads of states and governments of member states would participate. But in the meantime, EU has not organized any such summit with the US, with Canada, with, Australia, whichever other country with whom the EU and our Western world should share much more than just economic priorities. It shares values, shares democratic values, shares other strategic interests, including the 5G that, as you mentioned. Therefore, when it comes then back to the debate of EU and the Western Balkans, I said at the beginning that countering China's influence starts at the EU, not simply because the EU has to provide that positive example, that model that we will eventually follow. It's in EU's interest as much as in our interest to build those resilience mechanisms, both in the Western Balkan region as much as in the EU. But it cannot be a one-side, a demand that you in the Western Balkans need to do that. No, we need to build more frank discussion about that. The two ministers discussed in the first panel about the achievements of the Berlin process. I think it will be much healthier for the Berlin process and for us in the Western Balkans to talk also about the failures of the Berlin process. The Berlin process has a lot of opportunities and a lot of untapped potential to deliver also in relation to preventing malign influences penetrating the region and further the EU.
Thanks a lot. I want to tell our attendees here that if they want to take the floor, please raise your hand. I cannot see you, so unless you write to me or you raise your hand, I cannot give you the floor. Maybe Zoran, he wanted to, and then I come back to Vlado. On this common market and Green Deal question, maybe?
Yeah, just to give a little bit more perspective why the rule of law is so important. And not only that, but it's also the whole, the money that are channeled through the Berlin process. So first on the economic impact. Currently we have 39 projects under the umbrella of the connectivity agenda. So that's 32 projects in transport and 7 in the energy sector. Some of them have been initiated on the first summit in Berlin. None of these 39 projects have been 100% fully implemented by now. So we are talking about 39 connectivity projects that some of them have been initiated 6 years ago and haven't been concluded. This speaks as much for the Western Balkans, but also how the money are channeled, how European money are channeled through to the countries. What else? We have. There are many factors that influence this. Your question or the answer to your question. One of them is the necessary legislation. As I have already pointed out, in most cases we have the legislation that enables transparency in the process. However, this legislation is bypassed. If we take the example of my country, of North Macedonia, the way the money were channeled in our system was through bypassing the public procurement legislation and going through a lex specialis, with which they override the way the money are channeled, the funds are channeled through the process, in the country. So you can have the legislation, but if there is a political willingness to use this money, they will find, the politicians will eventually find a way to channel them. Then we go to the political arena. In the political arena, what we need, or what the politicians are asking for, and we can quote the ministers that were previously here, they need the funds. And here we're not talking, now with the new agenda, with the green agenda, with the economic plan, etc., there is a huge amount of money that it has been allocated for the region. We have to wait and see how this will be channeled, how this will be processed, and how it will be used. But the question is, if this money are going to be used as loans, something that also other foreign countries are offering, or they're going to be channeled through mostly as grants to the country. That's also a very, very important issue. Staying on the political agenda, as a politician thinks, he thinks in one mandate, maximum 2 mandates, right? If you don't have something which is called like the EU perspective, then why to go through the whole process and wait for all the EU institution and everything to be quite neatly organized in order to use certain amount of money, when you can go to the Chinese without any particular condition to take the money? Although we have seen in majority of the cases, almost all cases in the Western Balkans, that in the end, the citizens of these countries pay much more than is initially expected. So you have political leadership, you have the EU perspective, and you have finally the necessary legislative landscape that can be used in order to impede Chinese influence.
Zoran, do you think that countries should try to cope on their own? I agree with you on the rule of law stuff, obviously. But if we're talking about, let's say, penetration of investment that may be unwanted for other reasons, or penetration of other non-economic fields, as Vlado was mentioning, do you think countries should push back, or they should, as Gjergji was indicating, use the example and the help of the EU?
Yeah, I would go with Gjergji. I think that the countries do not have the capacities to cope with these kind of challenges. So the EU assistance, both human and technical, is necessary for this kind of things. And eventually, it is also to the political leadership to understand this and work with the people and with the European Union to find proper ways of attracting more money from, let's say, Western or countries that share our Western values, instead of other third actors which have different visions of the world.
Well, I mean, I agree with most of the points that my colleagues have made. Maybe just to add a couple of things. I certainly agree on the importance of context and the end of geopolitical ambivalence. Clearly, as long as the region is in such, find itself in such geopolitical uncertainty, yes, there are going to be opportunities, yes, there are going to be incentives of all types by various actors to engage in these types of activities. I fully agree with that. On the other hand, clearly memberships matter, and it's very, very obvious that NATO membership for many countries in the region has been a very significant factor in terms of, blocking the ability of China to penetrate certain areas, in security, in 5G. I mean, there can be no denying of that fact. The other really important point is that I would still insist that we have not sufficiently mapped, analyzed the type of presence that China has in the region, because there are lots of very peculiar features and characteristics to this, to what they're doing, even in areas where we have been focusing on in terms of investments in economy. And let me give you again a couple of examples. A lot of people say, well, yes, there is no conditionality. Well, in fact, there is conditionality, only it's with Chinese characteristics. And that conditionality, has very interesting components. One is that it's very, very ambivalent, and it contains jurisdictional traps. We know the jurisdictional trap surrounding the Montenegro highway. How, under what jurisdiction litigation will be taking place. But again, this has to be made public. This has to be made clear to publics, to citizens, so that they're aware of this. The other more obvious Chinese characteristic of non-conditionality, if I can put it this way, of course, is the financial price, as my colleagues already mentioned. But there are other elements, and so we're going to be discussing some of these in the next panel. One conditionality is that if you get this kind of investments, the price that you pay is the non-application of certain standards in environment, in protection, in the way you manage your fiscal policy, etc., etc., etc. So again, we need to be clearer about these characteristics, and we need to have a process whereby China is no longer kind of able to enjoy this kind of the attraction of promise, the kind of hide and bide position in which they have been operating in the region. Well, clearly this has not happened predominantly because of the behavior of incumbents, because there is no, why would you want to reveal the precise conditions and implication of your engagement with China? But I think the EU, once we go down the road of EU accession negotiations, I think both the EU and the negotiating countries are going to have an expanding set of opportunities to block this kind of process of creating facts on the ground, as I like to call it, in a kind of in the non-Russian way in which we apply this term, and we know how this can be done. You can do it via the front loading of specific provisions of the acquis communautaire, in terms of how you manage your public finances, in terms of transparency. Yes, of course, you're not solving the problem entirely, because we have the case of Hungary, where contracts have now been made state secret for over a decade. So, but you're kind of slowly contracting the space for these types of activities, and I think this is where we should be heading, both in terms of our analysis, but also in terms of how we engage and contribute as as policy actors in this process.
There is a question in the chat from our colleague Plamen Tonche from Athens. He asked Vladu, but also if Zoran and Gjergji want to chip in. While it is obvious that China makes most of the cracks in governance systems in the Western Balkan countries, is it also not a matter of a welcoming attitude for whatever reasons, as it seems to be the case in Serbia and to a lesser extent in Montenegro?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there are obvious reasons for this. One, of course, is that there is a certain normative affinity, let's put it this way, between the political philosophy and the governing philosophy of people like Vučić and the Chinese way of politically doing things. So there's no denying that. There's also, and my colleagues already mentioned that there is kind of development rationality behind this type of cooperation as well. Because yes, you have to overcome significant divergences in development. In some cases, due to certain absences or lack of convincing approach or funds by the EU. So that's clearly an opportunity. It's an opportunity that both sides are utilizing. But again, I would say that overall, the last couple of years, and certainly in terms of where we are heading, China is going to gradually begin to lose this advantage. Because its presence and sort of power will be revealed for a variety of reasons. And I guess the other really significant factor is that we have to bear in mind that so far China has basically conducted its business in the Western Balkans completely unhindered. It has not really been the focus of attention. It has not really been under any type of serious pressure, either from governments, from oppositions, I should say, or from civil society or from publics. We know that is gradually changing as well. We have lots of cases in Montenegro, in Serbia. Yes, they're kind of still small scale, quite local, but that's kind of, slowly, finding its way. So I think we're about to witness a series of changes in the coming years, which will make this type of behavior more difficult on the part of those politicians in this region, who are quite tempted to utilize the relationships that they have had with the Chinese so far.
Thanks. I was wondering, Zoran is in agreement. I was wondering whether it's only about the weakness and the capacity of the country, because I think in the Serbian case it may not be that much a lack of capacity, but it's maybe an excess of willingness. Zoran.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And I think that especially in Serbia, this is the case. But these are one of the patterns that we have detected while analyzing the ways Chinese influence the region. So they first, what we need is to build the resilience of the institution that deals with these kind of issues.
Sure.
And second, what is the pattern is that actually the Chinese go directly to the people that can deliver their results. And those are the ruling or the political elites. In Serbia, it's Vučić, previously for the agreements for the highways. In North Macedonia was Gruevski. And there was also a procedure, a court procedure against the prime minister and a couple of other ministers in our courts. So we see who are the Chinese aiming at directly. So they know whom to address these issues, the ones that can really deliver on what they request. And they request non-transparency, they request procedure without really monitoring what is going on in the implementation. So definitely there is a linkage here, but I would go back and just refer something that also Vladimir mentioned before. It also becomes clear that the lack of political commitment to the Western Balkan EU integration, and this is here I'm talking also by certain member states in the European Union, that creates and promotes significant and potentially detrimental opportunities for such actors like China to pursue their economic and geopolitical interests. In simple words, we have skeptical EU member states, which are providing helping hand to these third countries that have diverse interests from the EU ones, and by doing so, they obstruct the enhancement of the EU strategic autonomy. So we are making ourselves vulnerable from within, not from outside. We are actually helping the others to penetrate. And this creates long-term risks to the regions, but also European Union democratic and economic development. So therefore, we have already promoted a couple of recommendations. Some of them are related to the Western Balkan countries, some of them to the European Union, in how to organize the whole accession process. So one of them is to introduce, as this is the intention of the current Commission, to introduce qualified majority voting in the accession process and to avoid any more ridiculous bilateral issues hampering the progress of these countries. We have a new methodology for enlargement, for accession negotiation, which provides the necessary space for political actors to closely monitor the process. However, we don't have to, political engagement does not equal politicization or instrumentalization of the accession process. The new framework offers ample opportunities to assist the Western Balkan countries on the other side. So these are the positive effects. So we have economic integration, economic accession criteria have been placed in the most important fundamental cluster. So this cluster also encompasses chapters which are related to public procurement, financial control, and statistics. These are all part of this fundamental cluster. So therefore, excursions from future member states from the Western Balkans will be likely very difficult to conduct in the future, as they will be under severe monitoring by the European Union. And this is if they start accession negotiation. But here, the EU leverage is important, and on the other side, the credibility is important. If you don't have the credibility, the leverage is low, and the EU will perform poorly in the region. So that's concerning the whole accession framework. The second concrete proposal, and this goes for the Western Balkan countries, is to align with the EU regulations that deal with screening foreign investments, which have explicit provisions for the engagements of various stakeholders in the investment screening mechanism, and improve the transparency in the investments, digital security, and environmental protection. So something that we are all complaining by the Chinese investments/loans in the region. This kind of alignment will allow the Western Balkan countries to neutralize the corrosive capital and enhance the contribution of constructive capital, which will eventually lead to sustainable development and growth. However, as we have mentioned before, the countries cannot do it on their own. They need the EU assistance. So with the alignment, these countries will need, and significantly, human and technical assistance, because without it, we can have another legislation on a paper on which we are going to be fully aligned with the European Union, but not having the capacities to implement it. So we haven't done nothing. And in the end, as all the ministers mentioned, this should go with increasing funds coming from the European Union itself, channeled through not loans, but grants. So we need fresh money in the region so we can implement the project, especially huge one, infrastructural ones, swiftly. That will be my take.
Which will probably take us back to your qualified majority voting part. But let's not get there. I would suggest we dwell a bit indeed on what Zoran suggested, namely what can be done. And I agree that starting from the big narrative about the credibility of the EU perspective, but also maybe going down to kind of more technical things, right? you talked about procurement, but I guess there are also other ways to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, there is one very serious issue which we don't really address in these discussions in terms of how we actually calibrate our response to corrosive capital. And normally the way that this is done is via the notion of legal compliance, where basically we're saying, well, as long as the Chinese are transparent, as long as the Chinese comply with the relevant legislation on environmental standards, on whatever type of standard. But actually the problem goes deeper, because, and we are already seeing this within the Union, not so much in the non-members, non-EU members in Southeast Europe, but as long as there is this incredible discrepancy between the two models of operation, of functioning, we are going to have to, at some point, to address the issue of whether we can be content with the idea of creating somehow a level playing field in which one side is clearly politically, in terms of its governing philosophy model, is subsidizing in a sustained manner the actors which are operating within the European Union. I mean, we know from the history of from Chinese political economy that there is a range of companies that are created solely with the purpose to try out different models of internationalization, of penetration of foreign markets. Companies that are almost designed to fail in order to try out different modes, different strategies, different approaches. We know that there are companies which are, as a matter of strategy, supported through a very expansive range of instruments, financial, governance, tax, you name it. So yes, compliance is crucial. Yes, it's important, across the entire range of areas and dimensions. But at some point, we have to address the question of whether this is going to be enough, because the other side, is clearly operating under a governance, in general terms, a governance model that has an inbuilt advantage, as it were. If you simply evaluate their activities, through price, through such financial instruments. And I know the EU is kind of beginning to have this conversation, and it's kind of getting somewhere. But even within this discussion, we're still more or less looking at certain, critical infrastructure investments, but is not treating this as a wider kind of issue that, in fact, has a much wider relevance. Because what is to stop Chinese companies, multiplying what they're doing in Croatia, the Pelishevac bridge. I mean, if we do not address and if we do not confront this issue from a more systemic perspective, and this is where it gets really difficult, because this type of conversation will be very difficult in certain member states, and we are not quite certain whether the EU will get anywhere.
But from what you're saying, I get the impression that Trump was right to include the 5G clause in whatever bilateral agreement they signed, Vučić and Hoti in Washington.
Well, I think
no matter that the agreement had nothing to do with China and technology.
I mean, my take on this was, comes from a different angle, to the extent to which, 5G is just a subset of the crucial issue of the infrastructure of our future economy. Hence, all the other relevant and applicable security implications. But yes, if you specifically address the 5G question through this more systemic approach, through this more systemic deconstruction, let's say, of how you get a certain Chinese actor or a certain Chinese company to be in such a predominant market situation, well, yes, this certainly raises serious questions.
I think this is not impossible for the EU to think along these lines, but that would require probably a much more flexibility.
Sure.
Gjergji, do you want to maybe come back to my question of what can be done? Maybe you have a brilliant idea that we can finish with, but also bearing in mind that the second panel will be about the practical impact of all of that, about the pollution, about surveillance, about people feeling suppressed with the help of Chinese technology. I mean, what can be done?
Well, I'm not sure I have brilliant ideas as to what can be done. I have good jokes, though, from the Albanian perspective. I did a little bit of, I reached out at some people in the past few days to check with them some of my thoughts and ideas that I wanted to share here. And I specifically asked them, both in the government and also in the expert community, civil society sector, how come Albania has not such a huge presence or articulated influence from China at the political level? Because the political level was what really worries me in Albania, but also even more in the region. And some of their explanations were that we have this special relationship with the US, which, thank God, is pushing us a lot. So if the US ambassador says something, that needs to be done, and there's no question about it. The other explanation was that, the Chinese were also a bit too cheap, because they thought increasing our FDI would be enough, But obviously for our political leaders, it was not, because FDIs are one thing, and access to pool of money to pursue personal and narrow political agenda are a completely different thing. So maybe these are what saved us, the Chinese themselves and the US. I'm not sure whether that could be replicated in the region, maybe to a certain extent in Kosovo. We'll see about that under the new Biden administration. But let's get more serious. I really think that I stressed a bit earlier that the key to our resilience, to our internal resilience, is our standards and our democratic standards, both in the letter and in the practice. When it comes to Chinese presence and influence, I fully agree with Shopov here. In the past few years, we've been walking a bit in the dark, and we've been looking and worrying a lot about, rightfully though, Russian influence, influence coming from the Gulf countries and so on. And we somehow ignored a bit what were the Russians doing. So the first instinct tells you that when you walk in dark, until you figure out what's the thing that you might be crashing, is the minimum thing that you can do is to switch on the light. So we can start seeing, start analyzing, and eventually figuring out things as we go, as we walk. But at least we won't be walking in the dark.
Thank you very much. Zoran looks like he carries the light. Zoran, do you have an idea?
Okay, let's end up with a brilliant idea. No, we're living in very interesting times. This COVID-19 crisis sees the disruption in the supply chains, in the world supply chain. And if the Western Balkan, when a lot of companies are talking about shortening the supply chains, the Western Balkan has a competitive advantage. it's the localization of supply chain that really provides them, the vicinity to the European Union provides them with the opportunity, a lot of European and US companies, but also, companies that share the Western values, to invest in the region, so we can become more, the Western Balkan countries can become more part of the global supply chains. If we take just a little small part of the world's supply chains, that will be great, and a lot of problems will be resolved in the region. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
So
for-
we will basically prescribe to the politicians who are meeting tomorrow that they should please make sure that at least 2 or 3 big companies resettle to the region, non-Chinese, right?
That will be a sufficient start. Let's put it like that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. With this, I will close this panel and give you 13 minutes of break. Nothing fatal here, nothing fatalist. And we will reconvene at 15:15 with Valerie Hopkins and the civil society representatives. Thank you all for being part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're on? Good. Okay, the mic is on. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second panel on this very interesting conference about geopolitics and the region. I'm very excited to have what I hope is a very interesting discussion about some individual case studies now that the stage has been set for us so well, sort of the wider geopolitical context and the arc of the discussion and of geopolitical interference in the region. I'm Valerie Hopkins. I am the Financial Times' Southeast Europe correspondent, and I'm very happy to have here together with me two people you already know, and remotely I'm happy to introduce 4 panelists, most of whom I know and have met in person and gone reporting with, but unfortunately couldn't be here with us today. So first we have Jovan Rajic from RERI, the Renewables and Environmental Regulatory Institute in Serbia, Denis Zisko from the Center for Ecology and Energy in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Jovan Amarovic from the Politikon Network in Montenegro, who is a member of BiEPAG as well, and Danilo Krivokapic from the Share Foundation. I think it will be great to have a very concrete discussion about not only what civil society is doing to be engaged in environmental activism, but how some of the geopolitical issues that we discussed are affecting, your lives, the lives of ordinary people, and the people on whose behalf you advocate for. So, without further ado, maybe I will ask Jovan to take the floor first. Jovan, you are working for a nonprofit that was established to protect, preserve, and improve the environment through law enforcement. And you give valuable support to initiatives across Serbia when it comes to expert legal advice. So you recently filed a lawsuit against, or you've been engaged in ongoing litigation against the planned Linglong tire factory in Zrenjanin. Can you tell us a little bit about the lawsuit, how you've built your arguments, and how the suit is also being received by the wider public in Serbia and by the government, who have made Linglong into a big partner in Serbia. And I think even the Serbian Superliga is now named the Linglong Superliga. So you must be up against quite a formidable opponent. Thank you.
Thank you for a question and for invitation to participate in this conference today. And first of all, I'm very sorry for not being in Bulgaria in person, because we are looking forward to travel again. So it would be a pleasure to be there, but unfortunately it wasn't possible this time. And good afternoon to all other panelists and to all participants. Yes, as you said, we filed the complaint against Linglong. You probably meant to criminal charges submitted 2 days ago, but actually we are participating in roughly 15 legal procedures against Linglong since the beginning of this project implementation in Serbia. Unfortunately, it was followed by a lot of irregularities and breaches of positive regulation of Serbia. This relates to very initial phase of project implementation, when the investor explained that environmental protection laws are not something that they should even concern in this initial phase, and that environmental impact assessment should not be actually obtained in this initial phase of project implementation. And unfortunately, government of Serbia, more precisely city of Zrenjanin and the autonomous province of Vojvodina, agreed to this, and by this action they practically legalized something which is not illegal. So we have procedures now related to construction permits, which are subsequently issued one by one, and we have a criminal procedure initiated by our part because of illegal construction. And third area, let's say, of our claims is related to, as I said, environmental impact assessments regulation, which were brutally neglected, I would say, in this phase. So just to summarize this part about Linglong, it is not the only project in Serbia which is implemented in this way. Unfortunately, there is it's not a precedent. There is several very disputable and very unordinary projects that are developing currently in Serbia, and the plants that are operating without proper environmental and construction permits, without proper standards, ecological standards fulfilled. And unfortunately, I can't see that this trend will change in a near future, because it's an ongoing process that is only extending more and more.
Just to follow up quickly, I mean, how are your legal filings, your criminal complaints, and the legal action that you take being met by the courts? I mean, this is where we also run into a rule of law issue. Do you find that the courts are processing these in a manner that you find is timely and fair? Or I want to let everybody have a chance, but I just want to set the stage a bit with this question. Thanks.
Yes, we are not yet in front of the courts. We are in front of administrative authorities.
Okay.
So it's basically administrative, still administrative procedures in front of, as I said, City of Zrenjanin, Autonomous Province of Vojvodina, and Ministry for Environment and for Construction, depending on procedure, which are a second instance authority. So far. Unfortunately, the state does not protect rule of law in this case. They are protecting foreign investor against public interest, because it is that simple. In this case, we have a public interest from one side, and we have an interest of foreign investor on the other side. So far, the state took the stand of this other party, unfortunately.
Thank you so much. I want to come back and talk a bit more about how you build the cases, how you build the strategy and build public support. But I will turn to Denis Zisko from the Center for Ecology and Energy in Bosnia. Denis, in the pre-COVID era, we spent some time together in Tuzla. We saw some of the environmental degradation and devastation around one of these big power plants, and looked at some of the potential problems with a planned Chinese investment going ahead. Can you tell us a little bit give us an update on what the situation is now in Tuzla? How is the air pollution, and how are your legal challenges and activism being received in Tuzla by the Federation and by the state level authorities? Thanks.
Yeah, okay, thank you for the invitation. First, I'm sorry not to be there. I had my bags packed, and then unfortunately I got my results of the test on COVID, and now you're talking to a person which is COVID positive, so be aware of that. I have the coronavirus. But anyway, I'm feeling good, so it's okay. So, coming back to the story about Tuzla 7, unfortunately, the actual preparatory works for the construction of Tuzla 7 have been completed by now. And we could expect the Chinese workers to come to the construction site somewhere in spring of next year. That's probably also due to Corona crisis. The thing is, if you are talking about the air pollution, if I would turn the camera through the window here, you wouldn't see much, because today we got the temperature inversion, so the smog is just Well, you can say that it's continuing to kill us, and it will continue to do it for, well, you can say decades to come, because nothing has been done to improve the situation related to air pollution prevention measures for, well, since we've been talking about that, and we've been talking about that for quite some time. If we talk about the following with what Jovan said, if we talk about the legal proceedings and stuff we have done in the past related to environmental permits and cross-border problems and complaints to the Aarhus Convention and to the ESPO Convention and recently to UN Human Rights Department, unfortunately the whole process is going quite slow. So it's not really preventing the stuff to happen here on the ground. And when we talk about the local courts, we have initiated several court cases against the environmental permits, which have been, let's say, on the cantonal level of the courts for 3 to 4 years, and then they have made the judgment, and now we are complaining to the higher court. The unfortunate thing is that we assume that until we get the final judgment from the High Court, the actual permits will expire because the permits last for 5 years. So that's the trend we see with the local courts now and with the authorities. It seems that they're very happy sort of to stop the complaint process by going to court, because they know that the court will prolong the whole decision making for a very long time, and we will never get the actual judgment. And in the meantime, as I said, the environmental permits will expire, and then we'll have to restart the whole cycle. So unfortunately, the local courts, or the tactics to try to improve something through the local courts, has proven to be, well, not successful. And it has become a delaying tactics of the authorities, because unfortunately we live in a very corrupt country where the whole system is linked with the, I call them ruling parties, because they're basically ruling us. They're not governing as they should. They're more behaving as rulers than as governments, because we elected them to govern on our behalf, not to rule with us. Unfortunately, I think it was a misinterpretation of translation of the governance, where it was translated in our language as vladavina or vlada, and I think they got the idea that they're supposed to vladati with us, rule with our lives. But that's another topic. So I don't know if I answered your question. For the time being, that's it. I mean, yeah.
Well, we can come back. I do want to talk a bit more about how you know, some of the people that we met in Tuzla are reacting, organizing, and fighting against this. But maybe we can turn to Jovana now. Not to insert myself too much in all these stories, but I was also in your very beautiful country writing a story not so long ago about the fact that this Chinese-built highway had sent before COVID, once again, the public debt to above 80%, that the expenses were continuing to go up. And I'm wondering now, you know, as your country confronts a big public health crisis, I mean, what are the consequences of this decision on the citizens and on ordinary people? And what are you doing, and what can you do now after the deal has already been done to try to ameliorate the situation?
Thank you, Valerie. Hello, everyone. I also was packing my, stuff to go to Sofia, but I'm still here in Montenegro. It is a beautiful country, but for change, it will be better to be somewhere abroad. But still, when it comes to Chinese influence in Montenegro, it's all about the highways. They already said and it is about, public debt, which was around 80%, but which is now projected by the World Bank to be around 93% by the end of the year. And that's something which is a main task of the new government, which will hopefully be established by the end of the year. And that's just, like first level of impact of the Chinese investments in Montenegro, the one which is connected with the budget. And that's something we conducted the public opinion poll in March by Political Network. And the question was to the citizens, what is your opinion about the highway? And around 70% of the citizens said that they are fine with the highway and that Montenegro will benefit from this project and from the highway, but actually just 40% were sure that this project is stable and that we will be able actually to pay loan and to be like stable country when it comes to finance. And the thing about the highway and the public debt is actually that the contract with the Chinese is not public at the moment, and we are hoping that the new government will actually publish the contract by the end of the year or at the beginning of the next year. We are hoping for that, but as you know, the policy of the government in China is actually to restrict the oversight over their businesses and everything. So I am not sure what is there in the contract and whether our new government will be able actually to publish it. And somehow it is really important to have this transparency in cooperation and with Chinese investment, because that will be like real clear guideline to the other Western Balkan countries how to set conditions and actually how to actually mitigate the risks with these, let's say, conditions posed by the Chinese and by the companies from China. And our government was unable actually to negotiate well the highway. And as you said, what is the impact on the real life of citizens in Montenegro? The first one is on the budget and their quality of life because of this huge public debt and decline in real GDP. The next one is actually that their human rights are restricted because of, they have right to know what is there and how our government actually is implementing such a contract and such a huge project in the country. Our government is calling it as the project of the century, and the rest is actually calling it as the highway to nowhere. And then the third level of impact is on environment, because there is a devastation of the Tara River, which is on the UNESCO Heritage World List, and there are lots of protests by the local civil society and lots of criminal charges, but without any kind of developments and progress. And as I said, the restriction on the human rights, this is really connected with freedom of free access to information. And I will list later what else is not public when it comes to Chinese investment. And as it was already said during the first panel, this whole situation is actually influencing the rule of law and democracy in our countries, which is really at the low level at the moment. And this is something which is really beneficial for China and for their influence in the region. So this is for the beginning. I hope that I will have a chance to elaborate more on this.
Absolutely, you certainly will. Thank you. And it is a pity that none of you could come. I must say the hotel is very nice. So hopefully in the post-COVID era, we will all be able to meet here together. Danilo, the Share Foundation deals with, among other things, surveillance cameras that are being put up in Belgrade. I think every day I'm getting all sorts of Twitter notifications about pictures of new cameras that your organization is spotting across the city and across Serbia. And these cameras are generally being put up without so much public information about what happens to the data gathered. What is your organization? What is the Share Foundation doing to monitor this, and how are you building a coalition to get people who are worried and frustrated about this to try to encourage the government to be more transparent?
Yes, thank you for that question. Just 2 minutes ago, I was updating our table of cameras in Belgrade, and we reached the number of 1,001 camera in Belgrade at the moment, on more than 450 locations. So when our Minister of Police said almost 20 months ago that Belgrade will be covered with thousands of cameras, we didn't believe it, But after 20 months of implementation, this is now the reality. And yes, we do have the whole city covered with these cameras. And what is the problem is these are smart cameras with facial recognition software. So this is making possible for our authorities, our police, to monitor everybody at every time in the city of Belgrade. And when this all started, basically our government and our Minister of Police basically bragged with this technology. They said that they bought this phenomenal technology from China, from Huawei, and that they will be able to monitor everybody at the whole time. So our main action was to raise awareness of these questions, so that we explain to the citizens and to the government that this is something problematic. And we started with, of course, first of all, FOIA request, Freedom of Information request, and I have to say, police denied all of our requests for public information, so we don't know how much this technology costs, what are technical specification and all other things. And what we did, we start researching on our own. So majority of information we managed to find on the official site of Huawei, because they are a vendor that is actually selling this technology. So they want public to know what they are selling and how much it costs. But we also started to gather community around this issue. And yes, we did map thousands of cameras in Belgrade, but this was done with the help of the citizens. So from every part of the town, people were walking and making photos of cameras, sending us so we could publish them and put it on the map. So yes, now we have, I don't know, community of dozens of organizations, hundreds of citizens that are interested in this topic. There are now art groups making performances about this issue. So we managed to put this issue into the public discourse. We also tried the, let's say, legal ways. So what we fought from the beginning is this data protection impact assessment that our police must do in accordance with data protection law. And I have to say, police already did 2 of these impact assessments. And for the second time, our data protection commissioner said that this is not sufficient document for the use of smart surveillance and biometric surveillance. So even though we are living in the countries with the low level of rule of law, I agree with that. But if we are pushing some of these instruments, legal instruments, sometimes you can gain something. So I'm not sure where this is going. This is a multi-million-dollar agreement. So we already bought this technology, but what our stand is that this is actually not legal to implement such technology. We already have many cities in the US that ban this type of technology in public spaces, but also there are debates all around Europe. And this Thursday, we are launching a campaign, petition for banning biometric surveillance. This is done in coordination with organizations from Brussels, Italy, Germany, Netherlands, UK. So these are also countries that have similar issues. And yes, we will try to fight on all battlefields, international, domestic, to stop the implementation of this project, Safe City project, that is actually made by China vendor Huawei. And I have to say one more thing. This is yes, geopolitical question, but I was asked many times, are we more concerned that this is technology coming from China. And I have to say that we're more afraid of our government than China government. So this would be American technology or European technology or even our own. So our stand is that technology cannot solve issues that are deeper. So if we have a country with low level of rule of law, when you have this type of invasive technology, we could have many, many problems. So I mean, maybe I'll stop here and leave for discussion much more.
I just actually want to ask 2 follow-up questions before
Okay.
I come back around to the beginning of the pool. And the first one is, do you have evidence that any of the facial recognition cameras or the images that have been taken from them are being used regularly in criminal proceedings, or have they been disproved decisive yet in any court case?
No, actually, police is claiming that they are still not using this technology, and this would be illegal because Data Protection Commissioner didn't give them right to do this. But they bought this technology. This is super expensive technology. It costs millions of dollars. So I'm pretty sure they are going to use this.
And do you know then how soon it could happen that?
I mean, I don't know that. In accordance with the documents we saw, they said this implementation of this project is going to take at least 3 to 4 years. So at which moment they're going to start to use this technology, I'm not aware. Yeah.
And the second question, sorry to abuse you while you're on the spot here,
No
is
problem.
Jovana spoke about the potential for increased transparency with some of these contracts now that there's a new government. In Serbia, you also have a new government, but the situation is a little bit different. I mean, I was watching over the last few years that sometimes members of the opposition in parliament would come forward with explosive information, or I presume that parliamentarians are entitled to make requests for information in a way that ordinary citizens maybe can't always. Do you see or do you fear that with the new government and the new parliament with only with so few members of the opposition that there might be even a more decreased access to information, or do you think it will be more or less the same?
Well, I mean, I believe it will be pretty much the same. I mean, we don't have basically opposition in the parliament, and yeah, we are fighting this information for 2 years now. There is a complaint in front of the Commissioner for Freedom of Information, and we are asking for this information. They are claiming they cannot give us, but we're going to continue this legal fight for this information. But I have to say, other than the price, which is super important, in this case, we managed to gain a lot of information, as I said, from the Huawei website. So we know now a lot about this technology. So if the government doesn't give this information, we have to find some other way. But it doesn't mean we are not going to continue fighting for this info, because I think this is super important to know how much this costs. This is for sure dozens of millions of euros or dollars or something.
Thank you so much. I do want to say that I don't intend to monopolize my role as the moderator the whole time. So I do want to tell people that if you do have questions, I don't know what's best, if you want to send them in the chat or if you want to raise your hand. I will be looking here at the computer screen to see who has a raised hand. But maybe we come back to Jovan, and I want to ask, you are pursuing this legal activism and fighting against this through the courts, but do you also find that it's been, and I guess I will pose this also to Denis as well, how is it also trying to build a public consensus and support and a campaign for what you're doing? I mean, these issues of land zoning rights maybe don't affect everybody, but the quality of the air that we can see, quite often many capitals in the region are in the top 10 lists of poor air quality, topping Dhaka or Mumbai or something, which is kind of crazy that Skopje, with its 600,000 inhabitants, has worse air than Mumbai. But so these are issues that actually affect everyone, and I wonder, do you see that many citizens see it that way, or what are some of the challenges you face in trying to build a broader consensus and support for what you're trying to achieve? Jovan.
Yeah. I think that actually in the past 2 or 3 years, maybe in Serbia and I think in entire Western Balkans region, this concern from the citizens is raised on a higher level. And I think there is improvement here. That the people are aware of this huge problem, because we are all breathing the same air. So I think it's a slow process. It is not going as fast as we all would like. But yes, I can see improvement. And this is important because of this will make our job easier, of course. But where I see the biggest problem here is that people are they're not still available to identify reasons for this problem. So many of the people, most of the people are aware, yes, we have a problem with the air. It's polluted, we can see it when we go up, but not enough of them are asking questions to themselves, why is this the case? So this is where we all should work with the people to explain them. And it's not easy in the countries like countries in Western Balkans, where is two major problems, lack of information and lack of law implementation. So these countries with these two problems I would say, ideal strategic partner for suspicious investments and disputable investments like those you mentioned from China. So our government doesn't ask many questions and doesn't react when the polluters make law breaches. So in order to save social peace, social order, in order to save jobs for the people, they're practically very much quiet when it comes to ecological standards. So they are trying in this way, they are trying also to keep the citizens calm and not to actually inform them about the reasons, as I said, why the air is polluted. And they don't want to turn the rage of the people against those investors, because this would mean that they would turn the rage to themselves, actually, because they are practically arranging these transactions with the strategic partners. Just to clarify here, earlier this year, in the beginning of 2020, Serbia adopted a new law on infrastructural projects, which was not so covered in the medias, even independent medias, but it's a very problematic law on traffic infrastructure, which practically allowed the government to choose strategic partners directly, without public procurements, without competition and commercial rules must be fulfilled. They are practically allowed to choose the partners for infrastructural projects as they wish, or they are also entitled to give the order to some sub-body of the government or other ruling authority to choose these partners even on the local level. So this was a huge problem and a huge step back for transparency, for the rules of public procurement and everything else. So this is another, I would say, problem that we will face in the future. And as I said, one more step back.
Just as a quick follow-on onto that, I mean, many of you are representing countries where the public broadcaster and much of the larger media outlets are quite, how to put it, in favor of the government, shall we say. I mean, what are some of the successful strategies that you have found or to get the broadest access to the public to sway their opinion in a place where there is such a small kind of independent media?
To be honest, I don't have the answer to your question yet. We are trying very hard to explain, as I said, to explain this is a broader question. It's not a political question. It's a question for all of us. So far, we have access to independent medias, to television, to newspaper, but as you know, of course, in Serbia, you can't reach the mainstream medias, national frequency medias, because this is not a popular thing to be said. Very started campaign last Friday related to clean air in Belgrade, and we lease billboards in 4 locations in Belgrade, and we even have a problem with this to find the agency who is ready to rent us a place for billboards, because it is, I admit, it's a provocative campaign. It says on the billboard, the air pollution kills us. Who order killings? So, but we didn't put our finger to anybody. We just asked general question: who is responsible? This is the whole sense for this. And as I said, we had a problem with the agencies. Unfortunately, we find the one who wanted to work with us, but there was a problem.
Wow, thank you very much. Denis, I would like to ask you a similar question. How are you, there are so many people around the area of the power plant that can speak about the damage that they've had to their food, to their air, to their lungs, but how do you transpose that into broader activism over the issue?
Yeah, well, as you know, I'm in this business for quite some time now. Basically, when we started almost a decade ago, this fight against coal, basically it's fight against coal, and we started that in a coal mining area, we were immediately considered and treated as enemies of the state, as enemies of the coal miners. As you all know the narrative, so there is no need for me to repeat that. Well, after a while, through coming out with facts, because that's the only way you can actually try to attract wider support for whatever you do, coming out with the facts about the health issues, because we tried with money, we tried with corruption, we tried with many approaches to the campaign. The best actual tool we had is when we tackled the issue of health. So that's when we started to get more support for our activities. So basically, if you compare the reactions to a statement that coal kills now compared to that same statement 10 years ago, it's a completely different reaction from the general population. So that's the approach that worked for us. I'm not saying that that's the recipe that can work everywhere else, but here it worked. Of course, initially we were targeting the big coal power plant we have, which is using the technology, old 40, 50 years old technology. And there we had a huge negative response from the general population, because once again, the authorities using the media were saying that we are trying to jeopardize their jobs and jeopardize the most profitable economic sector in the country. We are foreign spies, as I said, the usual narrative. But even though they were attacking us for, well, blaming us for this, in the meantime, the general population actually got and understood the problem of coal. And that was actually the message we wanted to give. that burning coal kills. Even though they were blaming the households, the household heating and everything else, it worked. So now when you're talking about air pollution, everyone is talking about the cause, which is burning coal. So it took us 10 years, but we got there. And of course, now there is a pressure from the general population on the authorities to tackle the issue of burning of coal in the household sector, which is contributing quite a lot. But also there is an improved support to the stuff we are talking about against the coal power plant. Well, during this process, of course, the authorities and Ekaterina, which is leading this project of Tuzla 7, sort of used or misused our narrative, stating that they are going to deal with the problem of coal pollution by building a new and modern block which will replace the old polluting blocks. There we come to the problem of ash disposal and the actual health risks and health issues caused by ash disposal. At this point, we are still not as far as we got in the air pollution issues in building this negative approach of the general population about the health problems caused by ash pollution. It's more concentrated, it's more difficult to explain the consequences of the ash disposal the way it's done here in Tuzla, the negative health impacts, not just on the population living just in the vicinity of the ash disposal site, but also wider, be it through underground water pollution or by just dust being picked up from the ash disposal site and blown into the center of town. There are some positive movements there also. And coming back to the media, fortunately, well, after lots of efforts, we finally managed to attract also the attention of the media to that problem. I mean, you remember you were here. So, so we have reactions, and now we even have the let's call them state-owned media addressing that problem. Very shy, but still they saw that it's something that they cannot completely ignore. And the thing that we managed in the last, well, now we have elections, local elections in 15 days, basically. We managed to push this question of ash disposal into the narrative of the pre-election campaign of certain political parties. So, the answer is, you have to be patient. It's not going to happen overnight. Well, the good thing is that we are very young and enthusiastic. So it will take some time, but we'll get there. And I think, yeah, that's it for now.
Thank you. Thanks. Jovana, I wanted to ask you, we saw quite a lot of public polling in the wake of the COVID crisis, kind of narrative shifting in Serbia about how many people in Serbia see China as one of the biggest allies, one of the biggest donors, and one of the biggest helpers. I saw also recently that Montenegro has done their statistics such that, including the debts, China is also the biggest investor, is now the biggest investor in Montenegro, right? But I wonder, you mentioned this public opinion polling that you did, and I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about the way that Montenegrin citizens perceive China and the influence that they are increasingly having in the region, and maybe tell us if it's different from the general public in Serbia. Thanks.
Well, it is definitely different because the Chinese, like let's say, support during the COVID was rather symbolic. It wasn't that big as it was in Serbia, and our government was trying, to push for the narrative that the EU was the main donor and the EU is the main partner, and they had actually public statement for each of the nations, but as I said, the Chinese support was rather similar. But as we said, for the first time now, China is listed as the major foreign investor in the country, and these investments are are around 70 million euro for the first 8 months of the year. And actually, the central bank is declared such information to be confidential. So basically, everything which is connected with the Chinese investments in China in the country is actually internal. It is not, the public does not have access to such information. So that's the first thing about the investments during the last year, and it's really like a surprise that China wasn't listed within the major investors during the previous years. And also, it's not just about the contract with the China Road and Bridge Company. It's about they are not obliged to pay many taxes according to the contract, and so far we don't have clear information about the amount of the money which they are not obliged to pay on annual basis. And also, the China Road and Bridge Company is preparing on monthly basis reports on local complaints around the Tara River, but they are not publishing such information. So we are not even obliged to see what local citizens there are complaining about when it comes to construction of the highway. So this is all information about the investments coming from China are not public in Montenegro. And when it comes to feeling of citizens and how they feel about everything, as I said, they are fine with the highway, but that was because of the government's policy. And during the summer, with all of these issues and all of these problems with public debt and everything, they signed a new contract with Chinese company to build a power plant in the north, which is worth 54 million euro. So basically, they were not ready for this switch of the government, and they really see China as a credible partner with all this secrecy and everything. So when it comes to citizens, as I said, they see benefits from the construction of the highway, but we will see what will be the attitude after the change of the government.
Thank you so much. Danilo, can you talk about, the nature of the interactive component of having people submit photos that they see? Presumably people are submitting photos of the same place, but do you have data on how many different people have submitted these photos? And do you think that giving people a role to play has increased their kind of stakeholder status in what you're trying to accomplish?
Well, yes, that was definitely our idea, to include citizens, because we are digital rights organization. So usually it's very difficult to engage citizens when we are talking about, data on the internet, or, rights for freedom of expression online and so on and so on. But this situation had specific component. Yes, we are talking about super advanced technology, but our citizens could see the maps on their streets. So this was really bothersome for them, because when they are on the computers and leaving some data, they cannot comprehend why this can be problematic if somebody else is having access to their data. But living in a let's say post-socialist society, when they see the camera and they know that the police has access to these cameras, then they see something problematic. And this is, let's say, we had the biggest success with the citizens with this initiative, and we are now preparing for this campaign that I told you about the petition. And I think there are more than hundreds of people who send us some photos or some comments. So this is, and other than that, we also included more than hundreds of people who are our associates who who know this issue and are included ever so. But this is hundreds of new citizens, that we don't know about, sending their photos or saying that they think that there is going to be cameras in their neighborhood and they're concerned. So I'm really hoping that with this campaign, with this petition, we'll be able to engage much more people, because now finally we have some reach. And yeah, let's see what happens on Thursday and in the weeks to come.
Well, that was what I was just going to ask. I wanted to move a little bit more to talk about cross-border cooperation. Am I muted? It says no. Sorry, the screen over here said I was. You know, when you are working with all these international partners, can you just elaborate a little bit on what you see as some of the main differences between those countries and Serbia? And then I want to ask Jovan as well a bit about cross-border cooperation.
Yeah, well, I have to say we are cooperating mostly with organizations from European Union, and usually the narrative is that we have much more problems here because of rule of law and stuff like that. But in this particular issue, when we are talking about biometric mass surveillance, I have to say we have quite similar issues and quite similar problems because I don't know. Even the oldest democracies failed when to pass the test when they got like this super advanced technology for surveilling people. You know, U.S., Britain, you know, cases in Germany and Belgium. So I have to say that it's definitely a trend for governments all around the world to try to get as much as data and to use technology, you know, to gain power. So I have to say that we are at the moment we have quite similar issues regarding what government wants to do with technology. Of course, definitely transparency is at the higher level in the Western countries. So there are much more information on procurement of this technology and much more information is accessible to the citizen and organization, but I think that this is problem for, I would say, the world. What is our stance? What societies we want to live in? And yeah, this is my opinion. This is going to be the issue in decades to come. How our government are going to decide that they will be using this technology, because we already have societies like China or some other countries in the East that use these technologies in a way that is absolutely not accessible by my standards. But there are some other gains they have there. When we are talking about petty crimes, they're basically crimeless societies, you know. So I just think that it is going to be really difficult, you know, when you have like this, you know, impacts from East and from the West to, you know, fight for this cause.
Thank you so much. Jovan, I want to ask you as well about cross-border cooperation, and maybe especially with EU countries. I mean, Bor, Smederevo, and Zrenjanin will all have an impact on Bulgaria, on Romania, on Hungary. And I wonder, have you established any ties to organizations in any of those countries to kind of work on talking about what the consequences can be, what the effects could be of some of these polluting investments? And what kind of support are you getting then also for, I mean, these are all EU member countries. What kind of support are you getting from the European Union and from on the topic? Thanks.
Yes, our partners and our donors are mostly from the EU, because we are, as an organization, we have this general rule from the beginning of our work that we are not participating in the projects financed by the state of Serbia. So all of our partners and the donors are, as I said, from abroad and mostly, of course, from the EU. But first about them, they are not very surprised with the situation here, because it's pretty much similar or even the same in Serbia, in Bosnia, and they also saw it even in some of EU countries like Bulgaria or Poland. It is very similar situation, but controlling mechanisms are maybe better in these EU countries, because of the EU, not because of the state's tools and legal tools. To be honest, I'm not quite satisfied with the cooperation between the organizations in these aspects. As you said, it's a cross-border issue, but I don't see that organizations are connected well enough and that they're working as they should work on these issues, unlike the governments of these states. I think that we should all learn from our governments how they are well connected, and how they are watching each other backs in these situations. And they really strongly and honestly supporting each other in manipulating with their own citizens. So I think these all systems are staying at and ruling the states. As Denis says, this is precisely good expression, ruling with us. It's a way they do it, because they are manipulating with the information, and they're sharing this information and use it for do their work. I would just say here we were talking about Chinese investments, and one example for Serbia. We have information every 2 weeks or 3 weeks or every 2 days from our highest representatives of our government. I saw the statement of the Prime Minister a few weeks ago that the investments from China are about 10 billions of euros in the past 10 years in Serbia, which is not true, because the investments are approximately slightly above 1.5 billion. But how did they calculate this amount? They practically take into consideration greenfield investments and loans that we take from China. So they practically report the loan that we took for infrastructural projects as the investment. And this is used how to manipulate with the citizens, to create our conscience to be like, okay, maybe we have a slight problem with the air pollution. Maybe we have a problem with rule of law, with democracy, with transparency and everything else. But what do we get? We get tens of billions of euros of investments. We get jobs for our people. We get huge investment interest for further development of investments in our economy. And this is the narrative in the entire region. This is what the government wants to create in the region. And as I said, I would like that civil sector is also well connected, at least close to this, as it's the case with the governments.
Wow, what an exhortation for regional cooperation on a civil society level as good as governments. We are actually already approaching the end of the panel. I just want to ask if anybody had any final remarks or anything that they really wanted to address before I turn it over to Vessela, who actually can make some concluding remarks about the panel.
If I may add something?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. No, the thing is that while listening to the first panel and my colleagues now, I think we are focusing too much on the influence of China. The thing is that all of these decisions are made by our governments. So we have to stop blaming others for the mistakes done in our countries. It is our governments that have invited China to come and give loans and everything else. So we have to start cleaning our own backyard first and stop blaming the others, because that's basically the narrative we have sort of taken from the authorities. In their narrative, it's always the others to be blamed for something. No, We are here to make the decisions. It's our authorities and our governments which are making these decisions. It's not China, it's not the States or Russia or whoever. Our governments are making the decisions. And of course, on top of that, you have the problem of EU, because we all claim, I mean, our authorities, and we claim that we want to join EU as soon as possible. And there is the role of EU. And EU is, unfortunately, I repeat that quite often, I mean, it's first of all very confused, because they have no idea how to deal with the Balkans and Southeast Europe. And the other term I use, they're very impotent, because they're constantly saying it's up to your authorities, which is right. It's up to your authorities to make the decisions, but then, in the meantime, they sort of provide the infusion to keep the status quo for the last 25 years, at least in our country after the war. So there are millions and millions of euros coming as grants to build the capacities of the Balkan countries, which is basically used to keep the status quo, because that sort of makes Europe happy, because they have no idea how to deal with us. So at least they keep us, we are not fighting against each other, there is no war, so it's okay. So first we have to start dealing with the problems here, and then continue to blame others for whatever is happening. And with that, sorry, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Thanks, Jovana. I was going to say I always found the same thing. Nobody, I mean, the Chinese didn't force the Montenegrins to accept that contract. They accepted it. Please, go ahead.
Yes, I also wanted to say, yes, our governments are, main reason why we have such state of the rule of law in the country and state of democracy and everything. And they are also, the responsibility are on them because of the damaging contracts and everything. But as I said, the part of the broader policy of Chinese government is to have this secrecy and to have and as I said, it is not known whether will we have now, when there is a change of the government, chance to see what is there, if there are articles in the contract which are keeping the data and keeping the negotiating positions confidential. So I wanted also to say that actually there is a lack of capacity within the civil society to deal with China and to deal with actually construction and investments and everything. Just two of NGOs are dealing with the Chinese investments and interests in the country, and two of them are monitoring the implementation of the contract and not of the contract, but the construction of the highway in the country. I see now room for interventions and for impact when we have new government after 30 years, but there is still a need for networking, regional networking, because we are not, as I said, there is a lack of capacity. We don't have enough knowledge about how China is operating and what is there within the contract and what are the conditions, and we have to deal together and to work together to improve conditions for such investments.
Thanks, Jovana. Danilo, I don't want to deprive you of the chance to make a concluding remark now that everybody else has, but...
I mean, I can only agree. I already said this. I mean, when I was talking about this intrusive technology, I mean, almost all, we had more than 100 media appearances, like 40 out of Serbia, and every journalist asked us, are you afraid that this is technology from China? And to each of them, I told what I said before is that we are much more afraid of our own government and our own politicians than some technology from China or their, secret service or stuff like that. So yes, I completely agree with Dennis and Jovan in this regard.
Thank you so much. And yet, we see year after year that so few people young people want to actually get into politics and change this. But we can have a whole nother panel about that, I think. I would like to ask Vessela to give a few summary remarks.
Thank you very much. I hope this is on. Can you hear me? Yes, you can. Oh, that's great. Thanks a lot, Val, for moderating this. This was a great panel. I will try maybe to summarize both panels from today and agree actually with what Dennis just said towards the end. that China is a lens through which we see our own deficiencies. And this is why we chose this topic, because we thought it has so many cross-cutting implications, from security to environment, from media through infrastructure, and it demonstrates actually that we do have a rule of law issue, an issue of the quality of democracy that also allows others to play in the field. That we need to be better with our environment, to try to enforce standards and green measures. Obviously that the EU should help countries to cope with foreign influence and with Chinese influence in this case. As Jovana said, it's an unknown place, it's a tactic that we're not familiar with. And also, as Zoran and others said in the previous session, we do need capacity to cope with this. I am very tempted by this paradox about money fueling stability or stabilocracy or whatever you call it, and as a cure asking for more money, which came out a bit from the previous panel. So I don't know where exactly the balance is. I guess the answer to a lot of this, and here I want to thank Aleksandra for pushing us to do the civil society panel, because I think the answer to all of this in many respects is really the answer that civil society and civic organizations can give, because they're the real criterion for what is a public interest, and this is something that our politicians often forget. With that, I really hope that we can enhance our cooperation cross-border and cross-regional in the months and years to come. I really hope that we will be able to do this next time in person. And in the meantime, stay healthy, and all of you who feel who are positive, treat it in a positive way. So hopefully it gets away quicker. On behalf of Marko and myself, thank you very much for this panel and for this discussion and for being part of this. And goodbye.
Thanks very much. Denis, get well soon.
Oh, I'm well. I don't have a problem with
Well,
COVID.
don't get sick then.
Okay, I'll do my best. Okay, ciao. See you somewhere.
Ciao.